Okay, here's my little intro for this video because I forgot to film one before. But basically about a year ago at a writing conference, one of my friends was talking about how he wanted this specific kind of sword. And one of my other friends was like, hey, I bet Grace could make that out of resin. And I was like, maybe? So I started looking into it and I mentioned it to another friend. And he was like, oh, hey, what if you make me a sword from Lord of the Rings? And I was like, you know what? I'll try it. So I went online, I bought a really cheap polypropylene replica of the sword, and I was like, I'm gonna make a mold of this, and I'm gonna make the sword out of resin, make it way more sturdy than the polypropylene, and give it a better weight, stuff like that. So that's basically what I did. This is my second attempt in the video. I didn't film the first attempt, or I did and I deleted the videos or whatever, because it utterly failed, and I had to do a ton more research and change the way that I was doing it. I am not doing it in the most professional way here because I was trying to do it in the least expensive way possible that I could, because I'm a college student and I don't have a ton of money that I can just like spend on this kind of stuff. But if you're making a sword on a budget, then maybe follow this. But if not, do it the more professional way. But anyway, this is basically a not exactly a tutorial, but sort of tutorial, and just a warning of a bunch of things to look out for that I discovered while I was making this sword. I want to make more of these in the future, but I do want to try and get more into making them with more, like, better materials and stuff like that, better tools and stuff like that. But for my first attempt, I'm very proud of this, although I don't know why my lights are doing that on my forehead, but whatever. But yeah, I definitely want to do more of these in the future. It was really fun, and I'm really satisfied with the results for my first time. So, yeah, enjoy the video. Alright, so I started this out by basically taking my sword, making sure that I had my foam board with the matte coating on it measured to the right amount, and then I hot glued my two pieces together. Online, I saw people recommending hot glue for this because it does tend to seal in stuff better, and I think it did work super well. It definitely worked for this part. And then I just added a few pieces to make my sword as flat as possible. I could have gotten it a little more flat, I discovered afterwards. Definitely try and make it as flat as possible. And then I took an oil-based clay, that's very important because you don't want it to dry, and surrounded the entire sword and then trimmed the edges down. More matte board, and encased the entire thing, essentially. But yeah, the point of the clay is to cut your sword essentially in half so that the silicone mold is only half of the sword, and then you encase it so that obviously the silicone doesn't just go everywhere. So yeah, that's all my hot glue. It looked so bad, but I was like, you know what, if this will keep it in, that's good. I did leave these 3 little indentations because I was planning on making a 2-part mold. That didn't wind up happening though, but I did have those and they were a pain later. So I got my silicone off Amazon. I just found one that had decent reviews and just was a price that I could handle. And then I just poured it in there. It took about 4 to 5 pours before I had fully covered the sword. And I also used a few chunks of silicone from another mold that I made a while ago and threw it in there because I saw online that you can do that to kind of save silicone with the pieces you don't use. So I wanted to take the silicone mold out with it still attached to the sword so that the sword would still be sealed to the silicone and I could pour the second half over it. That didn't wind up working. It was too stuck in there and I could not for the life of me get it out. So I wound up with just half of the sword and I decided to make do with that and just went straight into pouring resin into that and figured I will make 2 halves and that'll work fine. I had to sort of block off those indentation holes that I made, which you can see kind of in the corner there, the block of clay holding that piece of silicone up against the hole. Kind of worked, but you can see in the corner down at the bottom, it very much stayed like it spilled and it cured connected to the sword. So I had to take my little knife and like saw that apart, and that was not fun, but it did eventually come out. I had overspill in a few places, and I fixed that by just cutting it all off, sanding it down, stuff like that. These were the 2 halves once I had them together, and I was actually super happy with this. Again, I sanded everything down so that it was as smooth as possible, and I used a heat gun to soften the resin and like push the 2 halves together so that they attached. Now to actually officially attach them, I decided to use UV resin, which I've never used before, so I went to the store, bought it, said 2 to 4 minute curing time, and I was like, alright, bet, let's go with this. So I kind of just kept the sword halves lined up, and I squirted the UV resin on there, and I just did this section by section so that I could make sure each section was as pressed together as I possibly could and as straight as possible. I didn't want to make it wrong and like have a huge problem to fix. Also, this is a terrible camera angle, I know, but my room was full of sword making materials and I didn't know where else to film, so oh well. So yeah, then you just take this light and shine it on it, and it really did. It only took a few minutes before the thing was cured. I super recommend UV resin if you want to try that out. It's super easy to work with and it cures so fast. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, I just did that section by section. I think only show one section here. So my next step was to spray paint this, but it only worked for the black part, and I went over it the rest of the sword in acrylic, and that worked way, way better, and I think the resin was just too clear for spray paint. Okay, so I am officially done painting. Here is the original sword, and here is the one I made. I think mine is a little thicker. It looks a little ugly on the side because that's where the seam was like connected. It would probably look better if I had been able to make the mold all one piece, but you know what? I'm pretty happy with this as it is. I might do one more coat on this that's like a gloss just so that it's going to seal all the paint in there and it'll be less likely to chip. But other than that, we're done. And for my first attempt ever making a sword, I think it turned out pretty good. So, thanks for watching.